my friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori if you're new, and I'm so excited that you're here. I fully understand that we're coming into springtime, and that's not always the time that everyone likes to read horror books. However, so many people have asked me for some of my favorite horror recommendations, and so I wanted to make this video as soon as possible to appease all of your horror needs. And so I've structured this video as mildly scary, then we're gonna get into pretty creepy, and then some super scary horror books. So if you're looking to spice up your springtime reading and your summer reading, I know that for me, I read horror in between like fantasy books because they're usually so fast and so thrilling and like entertaining to read. So I'm really excited about this video. I hope that you are too. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and let's get right into it. Wow, this is an exciting day. Like I said, we're gonna start with some mildly scary horror books, and then as we go, it's going to increase the scary factor. At least in my opinion. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Horrid, and this is by Katrina Leno. It's kind of I think I gave this 3.5 stars. However, I'm adding it to this list, and it's the first book that I'm talking about because I read this in one sitting. I was reading this on a plane, and it was such a good like plane book. It was such a good like just sit down by the pool, sit down on a plane, sit down when you're traveling, and you want to read something in one sitting that's just easy to read and follow along with. This is your girl. So in this book, we follow Jane North Robinson and her mom. They're moving to Maine, back to her mother's old stomping ground. Her mother grew up in Maine, and so they're moving into this kind of haunted house that her mother grew up in and used to live in. I just love books about New England in autumn. Like, that is just right up my alley. I grew up in New England. I love a New England autumn vibe. Our main character has, we'll say, some quirks. She's a little quirky, meaning when she gets really upset, she loves books and she starts to eat them. So there's that. Everyone in the town knows something about her, but she's not getting filled in on the secret. And so she's trying to connect the dots. She's trying to figure out what's going on. She's adjusting to this haunted, creepy house that none of her friends want to go into. And she's trying to figure out, is it actually haunted? So there's like so many questions in this book. It's just such a fun read. Like I said, it's kind of an easy to understand, just like fun, quick read. And so I thought it was a good one to start off with for this horror recommendation. So this one, I wouldn't even put like mildly scary. It's kind of like not super scary, but it's a good time. The rest of these books are definitely far more scary than Horrid. The next book that I have to mention in this horror recommendation video is Bunny by Mona Awad. I read this very recently. This is a much more like disturbing type horror book. So we follow a scholarship student. Her name is Samantha, and she is a part of this literature workshop. The other students that are in her writing workshop in their senior year of college at this very elite, prestigious school are a group of girls that she calls the Bunnies, and they are a saccharine yet sinister rich girl group that call each other Bunny and seem to move and speak as one. It's very much a groupthink, hive brain type group. And as she starts to get into this group called the Bunnies, things start getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and as the reader, it's a really fun time because you're trying to figure out like what's actually happening. What does this all mean? I love this book. I tabbed it a lot. If you're a reader who likes not everything to be super straightforward in a book, and you kind of have to figure out what's going on, I think that you would really enjoy this book. It's not scary in the sense of like there's a monster or a jump scare, but it's much more disturbing. And I think Mona Awad wrote this with a bit of humor in it, kind of making fun of these elite, prestigious writing programs, and so you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. I was laughing. I just thought this was such a fun time, but keep in mind this is not everyone's cup of tea. Okay, now we're gonna start to get into much more classic like horror books. Next I have Rules for Vanishing by Kate Ellis Marshall. I've talked about this on my channel before. I love this book. This is a YA horror book that is actually mildly to pretty scary, if I'm honest. So we follow our main character, Sarah, and her sister disappeared chasing this kind of town legend of this ghost road. Everyone in the town, there's like, what do you call it? Like nursery rhymes and like folklore about this ghost road in this town that appears only to certain people, and you have to like play this game and count, and it's supposed to appear, and then if it appears, you have to follow the ghost road to the end, or you might get trapped inside the ghost road. And so Sarah thinks that that's what happened to her sister. A year after her sister's disappearance, her and her group of friends decide, we need to play this game, we need to find this ghost road, we need to find my sister. They have to follow the rules of this ghost road, and if they make a mistake, there's some dire, very serious consequences. This plot is so creative. It was so much fun to read. I read this so fast, and if I wasn't reading it, all I was doing was thinking about this book and what was gonna happen next. It's really fun too because it has different mediums of what's happening in the story. There's like interviews, there's text messages, there's like video evidence, and oh my gosh, it's so much fun to read. If you're looking to dip your toe into horror for something that's like, again, really thrilling, pretty scary, but again, it's a YA, so it's nothing too crazy, I 100% recommend this book. I think this will like hook you right into the horror genre. Now, I have 3 of Christina Henry's books on this recommendation list because I love her so much. They're all like very different from each other, I'll say. So the first one that I want to talk about is The Ghost Tree by Christina Henry. Again, I've talked about this very recently on my channel too. I read it in February. Oh, this is the cursed town trope. It's really funny, like there's so many tropes about like romance tropes. I'm gonna give you some tropes for horror, okay? We're gonna talk about that. So this is the cursed town trope. Every year in Smith's Hollow, a dead girl's body is found. And that's kind of deemed as normal, but one year, 2 girls' bodies are found, which breaks the pattern. And our main character, Lauren, is surprised, but she knows that the police aren't going to catch this killer. What's weird about this year, not only that 2 bodies are found, but Lauren starts to get visions of this monster in the woods, dragging these bodies, killing these bodies, and she starts to ask, am I connected to this monster? What is going on, and how can I solve this mystery? How can I solve this curse? How can I figure out what this monster is? It takes place in the 80s, and it is very much Stranger Things vibes. If you liked Stranger Things, I think that you would really like this book. Similar like monstery vibes as well to Stranger Things, except it's not a Demogorgon. For all of Christina Henry's books, so the other 2 that I'm gonna mention, she does lean into the gore of horror, and so it's not anything that's, I think, intended to be really stomach turning, but in this book, when they describe the crime scenes and like the murder scenes, it's very descriptive. So like just know that going into it, if you're not someone who really likes gore, I wouldn't recommend this book. Oh, the next book that I wanted to talk about is Mexican Gothic, and this is by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a Gothic horror. It's kind of a subgenre of horror, very descriptive, and it has certain elements in the writing style that classify it as Gothic. So you typically have a lot of descriptions of the houses and the atmosphere. It's a very this sounds stupid to say because it's horror, but there's a theme of death and like gloom over every scene. Like it's just kind of ingrained in the mood of the book. This book, we follow our main character, Naomi. She gets this crazy letter from her cousin who recently married into this kind of reclusive family far away from the rest of their family, saying that she thinks she's going crazy, she thinks she's being poisoned, she needs help, get her away from her new husband. So Naomi goes in to figure out what's going on, rescue her cousin if she needs to, and she gets sucked into this extremely strange family who lives in a very reclusive place. They live in this Gothic manor on top of this cliff hillside. Weird stuff happens in this book. This book is, again, much more disturbing and like extremely unnerving. Ugh, the characters in this book just make you go, like, make your skin crawl. This book is a little bit slower in the beginning, but it is so worth it for everything that happens at the end of this book. Okay, next I have another Christina Henry. It's called The Girl in Red. And this is a post-apocalyptic take or retelling on Little Red Riding Hood. And she is not as helpless as she seems. And our main character has an amputated leg, and so that's why she's not as helpless as she seems. She holds her own. She is such a badass female main character. I loved reading about her. And in this one, she is trying to make it to her grandmother's house because that is deemed in her mind as a safe space during this post-apocalyptic time period. A disease has taken over and people are just dying left and right. It's kind of like The Walking Dead vibes, only in terms of there's no zombies, but the people who are left after this disease ravages the population are fighting for resources, safety, things like that. And there's like these communities of people. And so that's who Red needs to try to avoid on her journey to get to her grandmother's house. It's really I want to say like a survive the night, but it's not taking place in one night. It's just her journey to survive and get to the safe space. Next we have Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. If you love super creepy witchy vibes, a creepy kind of haunted, cursed forest, and if you like to read about absolute creepiness with like a religious twist on it, I think that you will love this book. I gave this book 4 stars. We follow a young woman who is living in an extremely strict puritanical society. So the church is the law, essentially, and she's a little bit different. Her family has some devious, dark roots, and so she's almost seen as an outcast in this society, but she's trying her hardest to not draw attention to herself, follow the holy protocol, if you will. But a mishap lures her into the dark wood, which is surrounding Bethel, the town, and she starts to make some connections to her family. Emmanuel, who is our main character, that's her name, finds herself struggling with how her mom consorted with the witches. And was her mom evil? Because she was always told that she had to conform to the church and what is right, what is wrong. The witches in this book are written so well. And there's plagues. Oh my gosh, it is just all of the witchy vibes. I really love how Alexis Henderson wrote Emmanuel as our main character, and how you're just so bought into her questions of her life and you want to know the answers, and you're kind of figuring it out as she's figuring it out. Oh my gosh, the creepy scenes in this book are shiver inducing. Like, it is just so creepy. I could picture it in my head as though I was watching like a horror movie. It was so good. Last book in the mildly scary category is The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor. This is, I think, classified as an unsettling thriller. So it's not officially horror, but I deem it as horror because so thrilling to read, but the creepy, again, the creepy, like, scary scenes in this book are so well done that I think it could like toe the line between thriller and horror. 500 years ago, 8 Protestant martyrs were burned at the stake here. 30 years ago, 2 teenage girls disappeared without a trace. And 2 months ago, the vicar of a local parish killed himself. Reverend Jack Brooks, a single parent with a 14-year-old daughter and a heavy conscience, arrives in the village hoping to make a fresh start and find some peace. Instead, Jack finds a town mirrored in secrecy and a strange welcome package, an old exorcism kit, and a note quoting scripture. But there is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Jack is actually a woman. She's like a woman vicar or like a priest. And her daughter Flo move back to this town. Not only do they get that strange welcome package of the exorcism kit, but again, it's a town that has a lot of secrets. The folk of the town are very strange and very weird, and they're trying to avoid getting into all of this like creepy, mysterious nonsense. However, they live right next to the church, and there's some ghosties in this book. There's a lot of secrets in the town, and of course they get pulled into all of this mess. I didn't have any predictions of what was gonna happen. I was just along for the ride, and it was a good time. Okay. We're leveling up to our next category, which is pretty dang creepy. And I want to start this off with, this was a book that I actually read quite some time ago, and it has stuck with me. It was so incredible. This one is a long boy. He's a beefy boy. This book is Nosferatu by Joe Hill. This is the first and only book that I've read by Joe Hill. I need to read more. I need to read more. It was so good. To make sure that I don't give any spoilers and describe this book the best way, I am going to read the description, but I'll let you know like the things that really stood out for me in this book after I read it. This is a supernatural suspense horror book. Victoria McQueen has a secret gift for finding things: a misplaced bracelet, a missing photograph, answers to unanswerable questions. On her Rally Tough burner bike, she makes her way to a rickety covered bridge that within moments takes her to wherever she needs to go, whether it's across Massachusetts or across the country. Charles Talent Manx has a way with children. He likes to take them for rides in his 1938 Rolls-Royce Wraith with the Nosferatu vanity plate. With his old car, he can slip right out of the everyday world and onto the hidden roads that transport them to an astonishing and terrifying playground of amusements he calls Christmasland. Then, one day, Vic goes looking for trouble and finds Manx. That was a lifetime ago. Now Vic, the only kid to ever escape Manx's unmitigated evil, is all grown up and desperate to forget. But Charlie Manx has never stopped thinking about Victoria McQueen. He goes on the road again, and he's picked up a new passenger, Vic's own son. This book is, I mean, to be fair, all of these have crazy trigger warnings. If you are sensitive to trigger warnings and you're reading horror, look up the trigger warnings before you pick up, honestly, like any horror book. But this one is particularly unnerving and disturbing because Manx is a kidnapper and child murderer. So extremely dark. However, the suspense in this book is insane. Like, I'm not even kidding. For the, let's see how many actual pages it is. For the 692 pages that this book is, you are in suspense for the majority of this book. And you will read it so fast. Like, I don't think I've ever read this chunky of a book as quickly as I did when I read this. And it was scary. Like, I was reading this at night and I would have to like watch Gilmore Girls or something, like put down the book, watch a comforting show or something like that to distract myself afterwards, because I was so creeped out. To read at night, to make you scared, this is your book, sis. Ooh. Then we have the Happiness series. So this is a manga series. I'm gonna pop it up here. It's 10 books long. I read this on Kindle Unlimited. So check the trigger warnings for this series. This was so dark. It was a lot darker than I originally thought it was going to be, but this is like your classic vampire story. So good. The art style in this manga series as well is astonishing. Like, I loved it. I would go in bed at night and I'd be like, I'm just gonna read another book, like one other book. I would read like 3 of these books in a night. They were so addicting. You just had to get to the next one and the next one. So even though there's 10 books in the series and they're all maybe a little bit over 100 pages, like 130 to 250 pages, we follow high school students who get exposed to vampires after a couple mysterious deaths take place, and our main character gets turned into a vampire, and it's his journey on trying to figure out how to live his life as a vampire, but it has some really, really dark twists. Next book and last Christina Henry that I'm going to recommend is Near the Bone. This is a dark book. This has a lot of really dark trigger warnings, but if you are looking for creepy, gory, monster, survive the night horror, this is for you. So we follow our main character who is in a very toxic and abusive marriage, and they live in an extremely isolated location in this cabin on top of a mountain. She's treated as like a woman of the house who isn't allowed to leave the house without her husband with her, and it's hard to read. Like, it is hard to read at times about their relationship, but she ends up disobeying him, kind of going outside the home, and she stumbles across some really disturbing tracks that would indicate that there's a monster in the woods, and this monster starts to get a taste for human flesh, and she feels like she's being hunted. The monster is so creepy. The suspense will have you like biting your nails, and you will read this so fast. Again, if you don't mind reading about some really, really like dark and disturbing topics, especially the relationship. Okay, these next ones are towing the line of pretty creepy into the super scary category. I'm gonna talk about Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. Now, I gave this book 2 stars only because it was very well written, too disturbing for me. Way too much. Like, over the top, just absolutely horrifying. Check trigger warnings for this one. Our main character is Claire. In this book, the sister dynamic is really the central theme of this book. And Claire's eldest sister, Julia, went missing 20 years ago. No one knows where she went. No body was ever found. After her sister disappeared, everything was different after that. But then another girl disappears, and Claire is convinced that these disappearances are linked. And so she goes on this mission to connect the two and figure out ultimately what happened to her sister. I don't even know what to say about this book because it disturbed me on such an emotional level that I vowed I would never read anything from Karen Slaughter again because I just can't handle it. I think that if you can handle like true crime, like if you are all about true crime and you can handle really disturbing torture scenes, you would like this book. That's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to spoil it, but I needed to put that out there. But if you're looking for something that is really, really creepy, this is it for you. Ooh, we're getting into some really good ones. I'm excited. The next one that I want to talk about is Whisper Man by Alex North. The plot in this is so fast-paced and so much happens. Like, this plot is crazy. And it flips between multiple points of view in the first person. So it's really like you're figuring out the mystery and you're figuring out the story from so many different people's first person perspective, which was really fun and such a good way to build suspense. So again, this one's considered a dark, suspenseful thriller, but I was reading this at night and I would get so scared. Again, I would have to watch like Gilmore Girls or a comfort show after reading this book because I literally got so creeped out. This is a multi-generational tale of a father and son caught in the crosshairs of an investigation to catch a serial killer preying on the town. And the serial killer was the Whisper Man, who is now in jail, but these child disappearances have started happening again, assumed kidnappings, and it's kind of mirroring the Whisper Man's style. And so they're trying to figure out, is this a copycat killer or is the Whisper Man from jail like guiding someone? Like, what is going on? So suspenseful. It was so well done. I made my friend Katie read this like right after I finished it, and she was like, oh my gosh, you need to give me more, just like this book. Like, you need to give me more recommendations like this one because it was just so much fun. I'm gonna talk about a book that I'm reading right now, currently, that I'm in the middle of. It's called Hex by Thomas Old Huvelt. We'll hope that I said that correctly. This is another cursed town trope, but this book, like, his writing style is everything. It's really scary, like it's actually really creepy, but it's so funny at the same time. This book is about this town called Black Spring, and whoever is born there or lives in that town is doomed to stay there forever. The curse on the town is the Black Rock Witch, who is a 17th century woman whose eyes and mouth are sewn shut, and she is wrapped in chains, and she walks through the streets and enters homes at will. So like, this really scary witch just shows up like wherever she wants. She shows up in people's houses, she walks down the street, everyone in this town like knows about her, and it's just like normal life that they live with this really scary witch, again with her eyes and her mouth sewn shut, and they just like deal with it. And it's like funny because in the beginning of the book they're establishing kind of the relationship that the townspeople have with the witch. And she shows up in this person's house, this family's house. They're eating dinner, and the dad just goes and like puts a dish towel on top of this like scary ass witch's face. And you're kind of like, what is going on? The elders of Black Spring have virtually quarantined the town by using a high-tech surveillance to prevent their curse from spreading. Because when other people, outsiders, find out about this curse and about this witch, everyone is interested in the paranormal. They want to go and like undo her stitches on her mouth and her eyes. And doing that would give the witch her like powers back, and she mad. She would incite violence and terror into this town if she ever gets like unchained and unstitched. So they have to hide the fact that there's this witch haunting them forever from the rest of the world. And so Hex is this like surveillance Ghostbusters team that monitor like where she is, that monitor the information and the townspeople and make sure that no one of the outside world is finding out about this witch. But frustrated with being kept in lockdown, the town's teenagers decide to break their strict regulations and go viral with the haunting. But in so doing, they send the town spiraling into dark medieval practices of the distant past. I am about 60% of the way through this book. I'm listening to it on audio, and it is such a good time. It's so funny because like, it's creepy. Like, it's really creepy. Maybe the ending will get really scary, but so far it'll hit you with like something, a really creepy scene, and then there'll be like something funny that follows it. Just the perspective of the townspeople on how they're dealing with this curse is inherently funny. The last book in this category of pretty creepy is Suicide Forest by Jeremy Bates. Jeremy Bates, along with Christina Henry, are some of my favorite horror authors. Jeremy Bates did this, it's a collection of stories. They're not connected to each other, so I don't want to call it a series because you could read each of these books as a standalone book, but they're all based off of real world urban legends, and they are scary. I put this one that's called Suicide Forest in the pretty creepy category, but again, it's really like towing the line of pretty creepy and super scary. So this book is a fiction based on this real like urban legend, super scary place. It's just outside of Tokyo, and it's a vast forest in one of the most beautiful wilderness areas in Japan, but the most infamous spot to commit suicide in the world. Legend has it that the spirits of those many suicides are still roaming, haunting deep in the ancient woods. When bad weather prevents a group of friends from climbing the neighboring Mount Fuji, they decide to spend a night camping in the suicide forest. But they get more than they bargained for when one of them is found hanged in the morning, and they realize that there might be some truth to the legends after all. Okay. Are we ready for the super scary? For the books that had me quivering under the covers. For the books that I could not read at night because I would get too scared to go to sleep. And one of these books actually gave me nightmares. They are scary, but they are so good. I have two to share with you. This next one is by Jeremy Bates again. And this one is called The Sleep Experiment. So again, this is in that same collection of stories of the real world urban legends. Again, this is a real urban legend, but he's written a fiction kind of to spin off of that urban legend. This book was so scary. This is probably the scariest book that I've ever read. The character development in this book is excellent, and the storyline progresses so fast. Like such a fast-paced book. So the legend that this book is based off of is in 1954, at the start of the Cold War, the Soviet military offered 4 political prisoners their freedom if they participated in an experiment requiring them to remain awake for 14 days while under the influence of a powerful stimulant gas. So these participants in this experiment could not fall asleep if they wanted to because of this stimulant gas. So they could not go to sleep for 14 days, and they were trying to see the effect of how long a human can go without sleep, and then 2, the effects of that, of what actually happens if a person can't go to sleep. The prisoners ultimately reverted to murder, self-mutilation, and madness. None of them survived. So that's the urban legend. In this book, in 2018, Dr. Roy Wallace, an esteemed psychology professor at UC Berkeley, is attempting to recreate the same experiment during summer break in a soon-to-be demolished building on campus. He and 2 student assistants share an 8-hour rotational schedule to observe their young Australian test subjects around the clock. What begins innocently enough, however, morphs into a nightmare beyond description that no one could have imagined, with perhaps the exception of Dr. Roy Wallace himself. I have no words. The only thing that I'm gonna leave you with about this book is, if you want to be scared out of your pants, read this book. Don't read it at night because you will not go to sleep. It is so scary. And if you want to be really scared, look up this like urban legend experiment, and look up there's like a famous picture that's like associated with maybe this book, but it's like a picture that's associated with these like sleep experiment urban legend trials. So scary, like so scary. The last book that I want to talk about is The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. If you like true crime, if you can handle something that's like really disturbing and like serial killer story, then you're gonna love this book. You're gonna love it. And this was I found this on Kindle Unlimited. So this is in a very isolated location again. So it's an isolated mansion. There's this beautiful garden and a collection of precious butterflies. Well, these butterflies are owned by this collector who is this absolutely crazy serial killer. And these butterflies are young women who have been kidnapped off the street. This guy tattoos on their backs butterfly wings of like real butterflies. They're really realistic, and he keeps them, and he's called himself and deemed himself the gardener. So he captures and preserves his lovely specimens. The garden is discovered, a survivor is brought in for questioning. FBI agents Victor Hanoverian and Brandon Edison are tasked with piecing together one of the most stomach-churning cases of their career. But the girl, known only as Maya, proves to be a puzzle herself, and her story twists and turns, slowly shedding a light on the life in the butterfly garden. Maya reveals old grudges, new saviors, and horrific tales of a man who'd go to any length to hold beauty captive. So obviously, check trigger warnings for this one. So twisted, like such a twisted tale. So creative. Like, it sounds weird to say that, but it's a very creative plot, and the twists you will never see coming. Like, Dot Hutchison really crafted this story very well, and it's told from the perspective of one of the victims. You see all of the horrors of like what she went through, obviously like through her perspective and through a victim's perspective. So I don't know if you guys will be thanking me after this video, because you're probably gonna be really scared. But that's the goal, right? If you read any of these books, please let me know. I love chatting with you guys in the comments down below. Also, follow my Instagram at ToriBetweenPages, and I have a book bullet journal Instagram at ToriTimeDesigns, which I will leave on the screen, and they're always linked down below. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel to see more. I post every Sunday, and sometimes you get some bonus content throughout the week, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!